So I'm going to start by sharing a quick story about why I'm actually teaching this material on influencing without authority. For the first 10 years of my career, I had started as a computer vision researcher and was an engineering leader at a startup called Video Mining. And I grew to be the second in command of the company, so I had half the company reporting into me. I was very effective at it, but I was leading through a position of power. And when I decided that I wanted to become an IC product manager in the Bay Area, I had no direct reports. I had to influence other people who were my peers to get anything done. And I started to realize that I didn't have the skills to influence people when I didn't have authority over them. And I was getting frustrated with my work. I was then starting to get frustrated with my managers, my management hierarchy, and it started to show up in meetings with leadership people. I started to actually get argumentative with the CEO of Yelp in a direct meeting. Okay, so that's when I realized I needed to change something. And I went on this 5 or 6 year journey of figuring out what are the skills that I actually need to develop and how do I go about building those skills. And I took 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards, and I kept doing that until I figured out a playbook that started to work for me and created a flywheel for me to be effective at Meta. And I started to see that work became much more easier, much more fun, and I started to enjoy it a lot more. Okay, so the goal for me was how do I help shortcut that painful process that I went through for other people, and I went and built a course called Influence Without Authority to do that. So that's actually why I teach this stuff, because it was a very painful journey for me, and I just want to save other people a little bit of pain. Okay, so that's why I'm doing this. So let's talk about leading cross-functional teams as an IC, because this is exactly what you're all doing. You have no direct authority over most people that you're trying to get work done with, but yet you have to lead large groups of people to have impact. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about why leading as an IC is important, what makes leading as an IC hard, how do you lead cross-functional teams as an IC, and then what frameworks or skills should you learn over time. And then I'm going to give you 13 tips for leading as an IC that you can start applying tomorrow. Okay, so that's what this talk is going to be about. So why is leading as an IC important? Impact as in TPM comes from leading a cross-functional team to work towards one single goal and get victory. That is what impact is all about as a TPM. And then what does career growth actually come from? It comes from leading more and more people on larger and larger projects which are more complex, and then leading them to victory. That's what career growth comes from. As an IC, you have to be able to take on larger, more complex projects with nobody reporting to you and get work done. That's what leads to career growth. And then when people have this leadership skill to lead as an IC, you start to see people have hockey stick careers. They're just on a run. And this IC leadership skills sets the tone for that. And then when people lack these IC leadership skills, they get frustrated, they don't have as much impact as they could, and they feel like they're stuck in career chasms. And then you start to see that there's a disparity in your compensation. If you look at the compensation bands between a fresh out of college IC3 at a top-tier company to an IC7, there's a 5x gap in compensation, and it gets compounded over a career. And then, more importantly, how we feel at work determines how happy we are or how unhappy we are, and what version of ourselves do we bring to our family. I was one of those people who brought the worst self to my family, because I was being frustrated at work. When we are happy at work, when we are able to lead people, when we actually enjoy the people that we are working with, we come home happy and we bring our best selves home. And that's the real reason why you should learn to lead without authority or lead people as an IC. So what makes leading as an IC hard? It starts with the fact that you have no direct authority over anybody you're working with. Nobody is going to do anything just because you have some role. You have no authority over them. The second thing is that anytime we are handed a project, you have to collaborate with a bunch of people who you have probably never worked with in the past. But now, here is a key project. It has deadlines, and you need to actually get a new bunch of people all running the same direction. And you need to figure out how to collaborate with them. And that's really hard. And then, the people who are being brought together have different incentives and goals. They just don't have one goal, and it's your job to actually align those incentives and goals. That's what makes it really hard. And then, usually, the more talented the people are, you have more diverse opinions and more stronger opinions in the room. And getting those people to actually work together towards a single goal is really hard. And then, in any group of people, you start to see people with different levels of interpersonal skills. There are people who are fresh out of college who don't yet have different types of communication skills. There are other people, even though who are older, who don't have emotional intelligence. I was one of those people 10 years into my career. Okay, so people have different levels of interpersonal skills, and you have to manage those. And that becomes the job of one of you all in this room. And then, when people make decisions, we are all human beings, and our psychology gets in the way of making purely rational decisions. Each of us have fears of how this is going to impact us, what is going to happen if we do this thing wrong, or if we fail at this, or actually my team versus the other team's incentives. So there's human psychology that is involved in any single decision. It's just not pure rational decision making like a computer. And then, a lot of times, the work we do requires complex decisions with nuanced trade-offs. And that's really hard to get to. You have to frame those decisions well and then actually get people to align on what those trade-offs are. So all of these things make leading as an IC really, really hard. So how do you lead cross-functional teams as an IC with all of those challenges? You lead with influence. You lead with developing the skills to influence without authority. What does that actually mean? Influence without authority is the process of earning every single decision that needs to get made. Whether it is a very small decision or a very large decision. Your data scientist comes in the hallway and asks you, what metric should we use to measure this thing? Looks like a small decision, but you need to still earn that decision through a rational process. Or you're actually trying to get leadership of a company to actually change the direction of how you build something. Pretty big decision, and you still need to earn that decision across different layers of management. And then you need to earn the decision whether it is one person or an entire company leadership. Even if it's the most junior person coming to you and then asking you about something, you can't dictate something to them. You still need to earn that decision with them. And that is what influencing without authority is. It's the process of earning every single decision. And then, if you do influence without authority right, what should happen? People should do something because they believe it is the right thing to do, because it is the best trade-off among tough choices, because it is in the best interest of the collective, because they understand why they are doing what you're asking them to do, because they feel inspired to do it, because they feel valued and respected. And if you do that well, it should result in people wanting to do more work with you on more important projects. And that's what influencing without authority should lead to. So if you want to get good at influencing without authority, in order to lead as an IC, what skills and frameworks you need to learn? So after my 5-year search, what I really ended up is that you need to learn a bunch of principles and frameworks that help you develop an influence strategy for whatever you want to get done. And you need to learn a bunch of skills that help you execute on that influence strategy. Okay, so let's talk about these. What are the principles and frameworks that you need? So the first thing is that there are influence styles. Whether we know it or not, everybody has an influence style. You just don't know it yet. Okay, and you need to understand what those are. How do you pick one that you should be using? And then how do you understand other people's influence style? And how do you work around those things? And you need to learn that. Then the second thing is that you need to understand what is a mindset to lead with influence without authority. And then the third thing is that you need to understand organizational dynamics. When we are working in the company, it is not a single-player game. It's a multiplayer game with a lot of people having different incentives, different goals that are actually trying to come together and do different things. You need to understand who the players are, what the power structures are, what the incentives are, and then build those relationships in order to actually have an impact on the company. And then you need to build relationships and reputation. And you want to understand, how do you build real relationships fast? How do you build relationships with a large number of people? How do you maintain those relationships over time? Because no relationship stays flat. Every relationship has ups and downs, and you need to know when it goes cold, when it is warm, and how do you actually keep that warm. Okay, you need to do that. And then if you are trying to influence people on a particular thing, it has certain amounts of complexity, whatever that decision is. It could be, hey, we want to actually fund this particular initiative, or we want to actually sunset this product. It has a certain amount of complexity, and you need to understand what that complexity is, because if you don't, you get into trouble because you might think something is small, but the rest of the company thinks it's pretty big. Okay, and then once you know what the decision is, what the complexity is, you need to change each person's mind one-on-one. And there's a bunch of techniques to actually influence people one-on-one. And you need to learn what those techniques are and how to use them at different points in time. And then if you have to influence a large group of people, you need to run a great process. And you want to actually understand what that takes, and then build a process for the decision that you're trying to drive. And that's a set of principles and frameworks that you need to understand to get better at influencing without authority. And then let's say that now you've laid out a beautiful plan of how you're actually going to take a decision, and actually what process you're going to run, who the people are, and all of that stuff. You still need the skills, the human skills, to go and then talk to the other people to get that plan executed. So what are the things that you need to actually build from a skills perspective? You need to understand that human communication is noisy, and we're going to talk about that. And how do you compensate for it? And then, in order to actually influence any single person, you need to learn to be 100% present in the moment. I know in this room, half of you are not in this room right now. And how do you develop that skill to stay in this moment with that person so that you can actually be in the game to influence someone? And that is what presence is. And then, if you have to influence people, you need to learn the skill to listen deeply and to speak precisely. And we're going to talk about what that is. And then eventually, you're going to have difficult conversations with people. You have to negotiate with people. Every conversation at work is a negotiation that you don't realize is a negotiation, and that's the reason why you get in trouble. And then you need to develop your own unique charisma so that you can build relationships with people much more effectively and easily. And then things never go according to plan. So you need to actually develop positive intelligence, where you can bounce back from a setback in 30 seconds and then figure out, what do I do next? Instead of actually worrying about the past, what happened, how I failed, what is the implication of this? And just think about, what do I do at this moment to go get a better outcome? And that's what positive intelligence is. And then finally, we are all human beings. We all have emotions. And we need to actually develop emotional intelligence so that we don't let other people's emotions and our emotions get in the way of driving positive outcomes. And these are the skills that you need to be able to execute on an influence plan. Okay, so those are the principles and skills that you need to develop to get better at influencing without authority. Cool? With that, I'm going to give you 13 tips that you can actually start using tomorrow to actually start leading better as an IC. The first one is, let's talk about influence styles. So this is a framework from the book Political Savvy, and I modified it a bit for my own needs. So if you think about influence styles, there are two dimensions to it. One is, what attitude do you have towards organization influence? Do you view it as a negative thing, a neutral thing, or a positive thing? And then, do you take action to influence organizations? Do you just respond to whatever is happening in the company? Do you predict what's happening in the company? Or do you initiate the changes that need to happen in a company? Okay, that's the action-orientedness. If you take both of those, there's a 9 set of influence styles. On the left bottom, people who think influence is negative and who just are reactive are cynics. I have been a cynic at some point in my career as well. Everybody is. You move along this grid. And then if you move to the rightmost corner, you think influence is a good thing. But it's not my job. Somebody else is going to do that. That is a spectator. I was one of those as well. And then you move up the ladder. You're predicting what's going to happen in the company. And you think influence is good. You're an advisor. You're actually telling people, hey, this is happening. Maybe you should watch out that, because you're actually trying to make this thing happen. You become an advisor, being one of those. Then you go one more up. you know what changes need to happen in the company. You think you should actually like make that happen, and you go make that happen, and that's being a leader, being one of those as well. And then you move all the way to the left. You view influence negatively, and yet you are taking action, and that's Machiavellian. Not being one of those. Okay, so my tip number 1, choose to be a leader or an advisor in anything that you do. Okay, so that's my tip number 1. So let's talk about influence without authority mindset. So tip number 2 is embrace the influence without authority mindset. And what does it actually mean? It means putting the organization first, knowing that if you do what is right for your company, that is going to lead to you having a better career. Okay, that's what putting the organization first means. And then the second thing is creating shared ownership. Everybody has similar ideas. You don't own ideas. Eventually, if you want to lead as an IC, be a leader, what you want to do is let everybody feel like it was their idea. You want people to all embrace an idea and actually go and make that thing happen. And that's what creating shared ownership is. I think the third thing is to internalize that organizations are human systems. Humans don't make decisions purely rationally. So, and then when you bring a large number of humans together, they struggle as a system to make rational decisions. If you understand that, then you will realize that you need to put in work, human work, to get a group of people to act in a rational way. Okay, that's 4. And then 5 is be persistent. Don't give up at the first no. Don't give up at the second no, because a no just means, why not now? And you need to understand that. And if you understand the reason behind the no, then you can go do the work that actually like starts to move towards a little bit more than no and actually gets to yes. Okay, that's tip number 2. Embrace the influence without authority mindset. Then let's go to organizational dynamics. Understand the hand that you're dealt. You need to know who the players are, what their incentives are, like what the power structures are that are visible and hidden, and how do you actually like work within the constraints of that. So tip number 3, view the world through other people's perspectives. In any group, everybody wants the team to win. In addition to that, people come at the world through a particular lens. So here, for example, product managers want a clear strategy, fast execution, well-defined metrics, and a healthy XFN team that is set up for the long run. Okay, this is what I had been ingrained as a product manager, that the things that I should care about. And then if you're an engineer, you care about, in addition to common goal of winning, you care about large-scale system redesign, engineering complexity, timelines, and you want to learn new technology. If you are an engineering manager, you care about making sure that all of the ICs on your team have very clear scope for the level that they're at, and that the collaboration between all of the XFN partners is really well, and the engineering team feels like they're empowered to shape the product instead of just being code monkeys. And then if you are a designer, you care about building things that fit within the design system. You don't want to create Frankenstein UI. You don't want your PMs and your engineers saying, hey, can we just make this button larger? Can we change the color to something else? Because it just does not fit the visual system of the company. Okay, so they care about looking at it through that extra lens. Policy, again, looks at it through a different lens. Are the policies that we are establishing scalable, enforceable, and they're looking at regulatory risk? Okay, so every function looks at the same problem through a different lens, and they have a specific set of incentives in addition to the common incentives of winning. So tip number 3, view the world through other people's perspectives. Let's talk about relationships and reputation. Build the bridges before you need them. So I'm going to talk about the fact that everybody asks me, hey, how do I build relationships fast? It takes so much time. It's really hard to build relationships. And I'm like, you'll be surprised at how fast you can build relationships. And then here's the thing that I talk to them about. Tip number 4, work your way up the trust hierarchy. When people want to build relationships, they want to show how good their ideas are, how they can actually like impact strategy, and how they can change everything the team does. They start with that. But fundamentally, you need to earn trust at much lower levels. The first level is showing that you care about people. Okay, so I'm not paid to come here. I'm here because I just want to save some people some amount of pain by sharing how they can actually lead without influence. I care about you all to some extent. Okay, I'm telling that with words. I'm showing that through the fact that I've come up over here, and I'm investing 2.5 hours of my time in this talk. It's easy to show to people that you care about them. Okay, so that's something that you can do with any new person you're meeting. And then you can listen well to the other person, because 90% of people don't listen to what the other person is saying. They're speech writing in their mind. So if you are one of those 10% of people who listens deeply to other people, people are going to feel so happy that they want to work with you. That's the second level of trust. The third level of trust is that you are leading a group of people as an IC, as a TPM. If you did that with everybody on the team, if you understood every single person's point of view, you are going to earn the trust of the entire team. And then, if you can help them collaborate by being able to say, hey, we all agree on these 5 things, we disagree on these 3 things, on this issue, this person has this point of view, this other person has this other point of view, and you can articulate that and bring alignment, you will be looked as a leader by that group of people. Nothing to do with your ideas yet, but you've earned the trust of a group of people. And once you've done that, then you can talk about your ideas. People will give you the time of the day to listen to what you have to say about your ideas. And that's how you actually walk up the hierarchy of trust. That's how you build relationships with people. I did the exact wrong thing, and that's the reason why I'm coming up here and then talking about it. Decision complexity. Not all influence goals are equal. Okay, we might think that something is small, and then say, hey, we should go do this thing, and why are we not doing this thing? But you don't understand the real complexity of it. I've been in so many of those situations. Until you truly understand the complexity of the decision, you can't influence an organization. And you have to influence, you have to evaluate the complexity through different dimensions, and that's tip number 5. And the different dimensions of complexity are, what is the scale of impact? Is it a feature level thing, a full product thing, it's a company level thing, it's a society level thing? Or what is the type of impact? It's a consumer product, business impact, advertiser impact, integrity impact, legal impact. What is the permanence of it? Is it a one-way door or two-way door? Being very famous. The other part of it is it precedent setting? If you make this decision, a bunch of other decisions have to be made exactly the same way. And that's precedent setting. It has a different level of complexity. You want to actually ban somebody off of Twitter? It's precedent setting decision. Okay, how many people are going to get impacted? Is it just going to impact your team, other teams? We make that so callously. We are like, hey, why is our company not doing this thing? Because 2 other teams might actually have to be shut down if you have to do this thing. And so we need to understand that. How many people are going to get impacted by this? And then the centrality or the strategic value of something. Sometimes we don't even understand that when we propose some ideas to people. Okay, so that's how you have to evaluate how complex a decision is. So that's tip number 5. And then you have this decision, you want to actually influence it, and you want to influence one person at a time. Influence really happens one person at a time. And when you want to do that, there's a bunch of influence techniques. The most common thing is decision by traffic lights, which is making a fully rational decision. You have choices, and then you have criteria, and then you fill out a table. And we're going to talk about that. But there are a bunch of other techniques, like technique rebuttal, network persuasion, incentive alignment, empathetic persuasion, and escalations. And you want to understand all of those and how to use them and have those in your toolkit so that you can use that with different people in different situations. So tip number 6, at every opportunity, use decision by traffic light. I used to talk about decision by traffic light so much that my wife made this decision by traffic light about how she's going to buy a washer dryer using decision by traffic light as a joke. But then she went and used that table to actually buy the thing. And then I posted it in the Meta product manager group as hey, this is a funny thing my wife did. Then one of the VPs pinged me and said, hey, can you send that spreadsheet because I'm thinking about buying a washer dryer. She used it. Okay, so and then I joke about it, but fundamentally, this was such an important thing for me. Now, when somebody comes, an engineer comes and asks me, hey, what should we do about this? I verbally do a decision by traffic light for them. I don't say, here is what you should do. I say, let's talk about this. Hey, this is what our goal is. We have 3 options. Here are what the options are, 1, 2, 3. How do we make this decision? Criteria, criteria B. If I just visually, mentally fill out this table for option A, here is what it is. Option B, here's what it is. Option C, here's what it is. So we are trading off this in option A with this in option B. So I think maybe we should do option A. What do you think? That's how I actually talk about in hallway conversations. I use decision by traffic light verbally without actually doing it on a document. And then if I can't do it verbally, I'm like, hey, let's open up a document, and I just fill up a table. And then it becomes obvious what we should be doing. It smoothens every damn relationship you have, including with your wife. So you can influence people one-on-one. You have to influence a large group of people. This is the biggest mistake that I would make. I was not a process person, but I realized processes are actually extremely helpful. If you have to influence any large group of people, you need a process. It has 4 components. You all actually know this stuff, but I'm going to just repeat it. You need to be very clear about what is the purpose, what is the goal that we're trying to accomplish, what decisions need to get made, and then the people. Who are the people, and what role will they be playing? What process are we going to follow to actually get alignment on this stuff? When are we going to make decisions? As a timeline, what decisions are going to get made? When is each decision going to get made? Who is driving that decision? What is a work in progress document for that? And this should be transparent with everyone. OK, so that's tip number 7. Now, let's actually move over to the skill side of it. Human communication model. Let's talk about what happens when 2 people are next to each other. One person is trying to communicate with the other person. So what happens over here? So the first person has some input. They're actually speaking. They have some facial expressions, body language, emotions that they have. They have some tone of voice, and maybe other times they'll write stuff. You send stuff on chat all the time. And then the receiver is processing all of this input through listening, thinking logically, instinctively reacting, making some assumptions, having some unconscious biases, having some judgments, some beliefs, some social identification that's getting violated through this process. That's what the input is going through. And then you get output. What is the output? You're telling yourself, the person is telling themselves some stories. And then they have some emotions that they're actually feeling. They have some identity threats that have been actually triggered in some form. They have some mindsets that have been activated. That is what is being received on the receiver's side. Input was one thing, output is another thing. That's what's being received. And then now what happens when 2 people talk to each other? Person A says some stuff, means A. Person 2 receives stories, emotions, identity threats, receives B. They're responding to B, and they say some words, some actions and stuff, means C. And then person 1, again, receives a bunch of stories, like emotions and stuff, means D. People are talking past each other. Emotions are out of control, get into negative mindsets and unproductive outcomes. This is what happens in human communication. Just go check it out at home today evening if you want. OK, so tip number 8. Recognize that human communication is noisy, and you need to work really hard to actually communicate well with the other person. And then you need to do the other stuff now to actually compensate for it. You need to develop 100% presence. OK, giving someone 100% of your undivided attention is really hard. If there is one thing that you take away from the start, just let it be this. Try to be 100% present in the moment with someone and see what happens. How do you be 100% present? Tip number 9. You do that by setting very clear intentions. You set the intention. When somebody, let's say you're sitting at your desk, somebody comes and then knocks on your shoulder, and then you turn around. Tell yourself, I am going to give this person 100% of my attention for the 3 minutes that I'm going to talk to them. And I am going to help them to the best of my ability. Set that intention and then see what happens to you. That's how you start becoming 100% present. And then listening deeply and speaking precisely. Let's talk about what it actually means. Listening deeply means capturing the words that the other person is saying. First, everybody knows this stuff, but it's really hard to do. And you need to find your own tricks to do that. And I'll tell you what my tricks are. Then you need to separate out the facts that the person is speaking from the assumptions that they're making and the conclusions that they're drawing. And you want to tease that out. OK, because somebody might say, hey, it's 92 degrees outside, fact, and then I'm shivering over here. Or that everybody else is shivering over there. Could be assumptions. Facts and assumptions, just tease those things out. And then listen for their emotions, their identity threats, and their saboteur sage mindsets. And why do you listen for those things? Because it dictates what conversation you're having with people. Let's say that like direct reports or peers comes and then actually like is extremely frustrated with what happened in a review. At that point, they don't want to talk about what to do next. They just want to talk about what they're feeling. They're actually like in a victim mindset or something along that at that point in time. They want empathy to get from there to a more rational place so that they can have that rational conversation. So if you don't understand where they are, you will be having one conversation, which is, what do we do next? And they're having a different conversation, which is that, hey, my leadership is shit. Different conversations, because you don't understand what is it that the other person is trying to talk about. And that is what listening deeply is about. We do this all the time at home. You just want to understand these patterns, look at who we are at home. I'm just the same person at home versus at work, just slightly more controlled at work. And then, speaking precisely, it's about being succinct. Saying what you need to say, and then saying no more words after that. About having structure. Telling people, hey, I'm going to talk about this in this order, and here's 1, here's 2, here's 3, so they can follow along. So whatever is in your mind map, communicate the structure to the people, and then fill in the details of that structure to the person. That's what structure is. The third thing is being accurate and specific with the details of what you're talking. Every time you exaggerate something, you've lost trust. I keep saying this to my wife. Hey, that's her weakness. You say 1, instead of 1, you say 1.01. I've lost some trust in that thing that you just said. OK, so just keep that in mind. Again, I keep saying my wife, but my wife has the same set of stories about me. So if she's giving the talk, you're going to listen to those things. And then again, when we speak, we should separate out our facts from our assumptions, from the conclusions that we are drawing, so that it becomes easier for the other person to communicate with us. Hey, I heard these facts. I am making these assumptions. Is that accurate? So they can then correct you on the facts or on the assumptions. And then the last thing is speak for how you want to be received. You can talk to someone in the same situation and then say, I want this person to feel inspired. Or you can say, I want this person to feel insecure. And it's a different target. And you should choose that target. Because whatever target you choose, everything you say, your body language, your tone, your words are going to actually be directed at that. If you don't choose that, you're leaving it up to chance. You're leaving your entire communication to chance if you don't know what you want to be received as. Start speaking precisely. So, tip number 10, separate out facts, assumptions, and conclusions when you listen to someone and when you speak so that you know what you are actually like engaging with them on. So, difficult conversations, negotiation, and charisma. I want to talk about just difficult conversations right now. And this is from the book, actually, Difficult Conversations. So, there are 3 things that prevent us from landing difficult conversations well. One is that by the time we want to have difficult conversations, we have a bunch of negative emotions already actually going on. So, we choose to go and then express those emotions. And if we go express those emotions, we are not having a difficult conversation. It's like down the drain. So instead of actually like emotion expression mode, shift to resolution mode. Focus on what outcome you want and how do I get that outcome in the conversation. And put aside or deal with your emotions before you go into the difficult conversations. Every time I have done this, did not land at all. Then the second thing is that by the time we want to have a difficult conversation, we want to prove a point that we were right about something. And the conversation is not about actually like outcomes at that point. The conversation is about how am I going to prove to that person but that I was right in the first place. So, not going to land the difficult conversation if you do that. Shift from that to learning focus. What do we learn about this situation so that we don't end up in this scenario again? And then finally, this was my biggest thing, which is that only one person is wrong in a particular thing. Either you did this thing or I did this thing that caused this difficult situation. And that's where we get stuck in. But usually when we have a difficult conversation, both people have contributed to it. So figure out actually like who contributed what and how do we actually change that stuff. And if you make those 3 shifts, you'll be able to land difficult conversations well. So my tip number 11 is make strengthening relationships one of the goals of having difficult conversations. That should be the primary goal. You want to strengthen your relationship while having the difficult conversation. Positive intelligence. This is an extremely famous image from Tim Urban that's circulating all over the internet. We were born at some point, and then we could have taken all of these black lines, different paths, but we didn't. We took the green line, and we're at this point in time today. And in the future, we could take a bunch of these different options. But we spend all of our time thinking about those black lines, what could have been, what should have been. I was one of those people. I spent way too much time thinking about that. And then we worry about which of those green lines we're going to take. Spend way too much time worrying about that. Positive intelligence is the ability to focus our actions, focus our mind on the actions that we can take today so that we can have a better tomorrow. Just focusing on those actions. What do I need to do now? And spending 99% of our energy on doing that thing. And that's what positive intelligence is. So tip number 12, use journaling to switch to a positive mindset. And I'm going to give you a specific way of journaling. Every time you feel some emotion that you don't understand, start by writing, hey, what am I feeling? What happened to cause these feelings? What are the facts? What assumptions am I making about this situation? What are the alternate hypotheses that could be there for this stuff? What is the worst case scenario? What is the best case scenario? What actions can I take so that I avoid the worst case scenario and can go more towards the best case scenario? And what one action can I take now? If you journal that, it's going to be life-saving. Journaling like this has been life-saving for me. There were points in time where I would wake up in the middle of the night and I couldn't fall asleep. And at some point, I started journaling, and I would journal in the middle of the night. If I'm in the middle of the night, I'm not able to sleep, I get up, take a notebook, turn on the lights, and write. And I go back to bed happily because I know what I'm going to do. Emotional intelligence. This is where all of my journey started. I had zero emotional intelligence. Okay, emotional intelligence is the ability to drive positive outcomes in high-stakes situations without letting anyone's hijacked emotions get in the way. So it's something that you can actually fix. None of the books actually that I read really helped me a lot. Here is one thing that really helps me a lot. Tip number 13, identify the stories behind your triggers. Anytime we feel like we are losing our shit, it literally means that we are getting triggered by something. And a trigger is somebody else's actions tied to the story that we tell ourselves, and that is what the trigger is. One of my triggers 12 years ago when I first became a PM was anybody other than the product manager coming in and telling me that they wanted to work on strategy. I would lose my shit because I'm like, hey, you're trying to do my damn job. Why don't you let me do my job? Why don't you do your job? I'll do my job. That's the narrative that I would go through. 12 years ago, sorry, it's not me today. When I started as a PM, that's the story that I would tell myself. That's the trigger. But then the reality is that strategy is everybody's job. Everybody contributes to strategy. People are just trying to do their job. If you look at IC ladders, the higher you get, strategies and everybody's calibration thing. Once I realized that, my story changed. They are just trying to do their job. My job as a PM is to create the space so that everybody contributes to strategy and gets good credit for it. And once I changed the story, the trigger went away. If you want to improve your emotional intelligence, make a list of all of the things that you've been triggered by in the past. Debug your triggers. Find the alternate story that exists. And if you do that, your emotional intelligence improves dramatically. Okay. So that's my 13 tips to lead as an IC along all of those different things. I know we are at 47 minutes. I'll take a few questions if you guys have time. Or I'll leave it up to you. Yep.
Probably just one question since we have limited time.
That was a great talk, by the way. I don't remember the last time I input so much information in such a short amount of time. I'll have to sit with each tip for an hour to process it. One of the biggest challenge as a cross-functional TPM is how do you break down silos? So can you give specific steps or actions that you have taken to build trust among cross-functional team members? Not like with you, but making sure the policy person's talking to the legal to make sure they're in alignment to drive to that.
Yeah, I think the fundamental thing that I would do is actually start by building a one-on-one relationship with each individual person. And I understand different people's perspectives on actually where they stand on different topics. And then I bring them together strategically with an agenda of getting them to talk about those things. And I try to sit back and actually like make the conversations happen. I set the agenda, and I'm like, hey, can you tell me what your thought process is about this particular thing? I know what they think, and I'm going to get them out in the open. Then I ask the other person for their point of view. And looks like you agree on this, and here's where you disagree. Let's make a decision-making thing for the next time. So you make those conversations happen in small groups, and you bring those people together. Legal policy, like maybe engineering, bring them together on one thing. Same thing with design and engineering, not talking to each other. Go talk to them one-on-one, and then bring them together after you know where exactly the friction is. You want to know where the friction is in one-on-one before you go into the room with them so that you can manage it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Satish.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron.